Welcome to the Deep Dive. You send us your sources, and we dig into them to pull out what really matters.
That's the plan.
Today, we're really focusing in on these proposed talks in Istanbul, Ukraine, Russia. You know the ones. You want the real story, fast, without getting lost in all the noise.
Exactly. And we've got quite the mix from you, articles looking closely at Istanbul, some sharp social media takes, even AI analysis trying to make sense of it.
So our mission, really, is to cut through all that diplomatic fog.
And see what's actually driving this whole peace initiative.
Okay, let's get right to it then.
All right.
One thing that really jumps out from an article you sent is this argument that the Istanbul talks, they look less like real peace talks and more like, well, political theater, staged by the Kremlin.
Absolutely. That contrast between the delegations, it's really telling, isn't it? It's highlighting right there in the piece. Real peace or political theater.
Yeah, how so?
Well, you've got President Zelenskyy leading the Ukrainian side, clearly empowered, ready to negotiate.
The top guy.
Then the Russian side. It's led by Medinsky. You know, more of a propaganda figure, wouldn't you say? And crucially, Putin's not there.
No Putin, yeah.
That asymmetry right from the start, it just signals a totally different level of seriousness or maybe intent.
Right. It's like sending your CEO to a massive deal negotiation versus
sending the PR manager.
Yeah, exactly. Someone with no real power to decide anything.
Yeah.
And then you've got Turkey trying to mediate. The U.S. is kind of there, but not officially. Maybe some back channels, perhaps old Trump links.
That's mentioned, yeah. The ambiguity there.
And Europe just seems hesitant, divided even. It really just feels like watching a play unfold.
Performative diplomacy, that's the term used, and it fits perfectly, doesn't it?
Performative diplomacy.
Like, you know, making a big show of doing something while maybe the real action or inaction is elsewhere. The analysis suggests it could be a strategic distraction.
A distraction. To what end?
Well, maybe buy time. So confusion internationally, keep everyone guessing. What stands out most to you from that initial setup?
For me, it's the warning. The really quite chilling idea that just by participating in these fake negotiations, maybe we might actually be making it seem okay, legitimizing the aggression. Like if we're all sitting down together, maybe what happened wasn't so bad after all. That's
tough. That's the core risk, isn't it? And that leads right into this question from your sources, especially the AI analysis. Who's actually pulling the strings here?
Right. Who's leading who by the nose, as they put it? Is the West being played? Or is it the other way around?
And the AI lays out some possibilities, doesn't it?
It does. Really sharp insights. It suggests scenarios where, yeah, Russia is leading the West, getting them to accept some kind of, peaceful resolution that isn't really a Ukrainian win.
Maybe Putin dictating terms from behind the scenes.
Potentially. All playing on Western fears about what happens if Russia actually truly loses.
But then the AI flips it too, right? It looks at how the West might be trying to play a longer game.
Yeah, like maybe letting Russia think these talks are going somewhere while actually gearing up to support a Ukrainian counteroffensive later. Or Zelenskyy inviting Putin. Maybe that was a smart move to put Putin on the spot.
And there's always the threat of more sanctions just sort of hanging there, even if they're not being used right now.
But the AI's conclusion is pretty stark, isn't it?
Yeah.
It basically says the West is letting itself be led.
Yeah, led by fear mostly, not by a clear strategy.
It paints Ukraine as trying to really end this thing, but being held back by Western partners who are just too scared of Russia actually being defeated.
And it even suggests Putin's motivated by his own fear of Ukraine's courage. That flips the script a bit.
It really does. Okay, so thinking about the Kremlin side, why this specific format? Why send Medinsky? What's the thinking there?
Your sources dig into that too. The AI analysis suggests a few things.
Like what?
Well, first, make it look like talks are happening. Legitimize the idea without actually intending peace.
Okay, the appearance.
Second, try to drive a wedge between Europe and the U.S., especially playing on how someone like, say, Trump might react.
Ah, the Trump factor.
And third, maybe just stall. Buy more time.
The AI mentioned Putin might see Trump's unpredictability as a plus.
As an asset, yeah. Someone he might be able to manipulate, maybe someone who wants a quick, flashy deal.
Right.
And the AI forecasts the Kremlin's goals pretty clearly. Influence Trump, create this illusion of dialogue for Europe to maybe back off a bit, limit Ukraine's options on the battlefield, and stop more sanctions. It's layered.
A very calculated playbook, it seems.
Yeah.
Now, let's shift slightly. One source asked if this is totally unprecedented, bringing up Kozyrev, but another one, based on listener input you flagged, drew a line straight back to 1937.
Yeah, The lead up to World War II. Hitler, appeasement.
What do you make of those historical parallels? Are they fair?
Well, Kozyrev might see unique elements now, but that pattern, an aggressor using fake talks to buy time, test resolve, that feels familiar, disturbingly so.
And the AI analysis agreed.
It did, yeah. It noted parallels between Putin's tactics and Hitler's probing, exploiting fear, using diplomacy as cover. It's not a comfortable comparison, but it's there in the analysis.
So if that parallel holds, what's missing in Europe today compared to back then? Or maybe what weakness is being exploited?
Several things, according to the AI and other sources. First, just a clear, united political will across Europe. A will to see Ukraine actually win, not just settle.
Not just manages the decline.
Exactly. Second, there's this real fear of escalation, especially nuclear. The Kremlin plays on that constantly. It kind of paralyzes decision-making.
Yeah, third.
Maybe just a lack of consistent, strong leadership across the board.
But the AI did offer some hope for Europe, right? It wasn't all doom and gloom.
No, it sketched out a possible future. Maybe a new core group emerges, Baltics, Nordics, Poland, forming a really principled bloc.
A stronger spine, maybe.
Perhaps. And maybe France and Germany eventually snap out of this self-deception, as the AI termed it, and help build a stronger European security structure, one that could stand even if the U.S. becomes less reliable.
Interesting possibility. And you mentioned the Kozyrev interview is worth watching in full.
Definitely. For that insider view on Kremlin thinking.
Okay, now for something, well, completely different. You flagged this story about a Boeing 747 offered to Trump by a former Qatari PM.
Sheikh HBJ, yeah. Hamad bin Jassim bin Jabir Al Thani.
Good.
It certainly raises eyebrows.
Tell us more about him. His background is complicated.
Very. Documented history, some controversial links mentioned in sources, Hamas connections, even alleged ties, by some accounts, back to 9/11 financiers. So this plane...
It's not just a generous gift, then?
The AI analysis strongly suggests no. It frames it as a classic soft power move, an attempt to buy influence, cultivate favor.
And what's worrying is if this kind of thing becomes normal.
Exactly. What are the implications? Does it set a precedent for foreign figures, maybe from regimes with questionable records, trying to directly influence Western politicians, bypassing normal channels?
Blurring lines between diplomacy and, well, bribery.
Or at least quid pro quo. The AI worried about normalizing these ties between potentially corrupt states and populist figures in the West, undermining institutions.
And the AI called for scrutiny, investigations.
It did, underscoring the need for transparency when things like this happen. It definitely raises serious ethical flags.
Huge flags. Okay, let's circle back to Istanbul. We talked about theater, but one source really leaned into that, calling it basically a farce, a Kremlin game.
Yeah, that commentary didn't pull any punches, and the AI analysis sort of ran with that metaphor.
How so?
Describing the Russian delegation almost like they're wearing carnival masks, and suggesting the West might be complicit, just playing along in this show.
And it mentioned an ontological problem. What's that?
That was from the fake off commentary.
Yeah.
The idea that Putin fundamentally doesn't see himself as an equal partner for dialogue.
He sees himself as above it.
As an emperor dictating terms, essentially, not someone negotiating peer-to-peer, which, if true, makes genuine talks impossible, right?
Completely. If you don't even recognize the other side as legitimate.
What's the point? The AI even noted that satirical suggestion. Maybe Ukraine should send, like, a psychiatrist or a zoologist to match the perceived level of the Russian delegation.
It was pointed.
It highlights the absurdity. And the worry is, if the West keeps playing along with this peace process, what happens? Does it just legitimize Russia's position? Weaken Ukraine?
It feels like one side's serious, the other's playing games. Meanwhile, while this drama plays out in Turkey, something huge could be happening elsewhere. Balochistan, declaring independence from Pakistan.
Yeah, this is potentially massive. You highlighted this, and it's critical. Balochistan is strategically vital resources, location. The China-Pakistan economic corridor runs right through it.
And there's a history of separatism.
A long and often violent history. Plus, Pakistan's nuclear weapons add a terrifying dimension. And the fact they've apparently already appealed to India for recognition, that's pouring fuel on the fire.
So what happens next? How do the big players react? Pakistan, Iran, China.
The AI predicts Pakistan will almost certainly use force. Iran, having its own Baloch population, likely won't support independence, too risky for them.
And China. All their investment there.
They'll strongly oppose anything that destabilizes their corridor. The AI expects the rest of the world to be cautious, probably talk about territorial integrity, even while rights groups support the Balakh cause. It could become a really dangerous new flashpoint.
Definitely one to watch. Okay, back to Istanbul. Alexei Venediktov, former head of Echo Moskvy, popped up with his take on the Russian delegation. A three-tiered system.
Yeah, Venediktov's comments. The AI analysis treats them less as genuine insight and more as, well, carefully crafted information warfare.
Okay, so how did the AI interpret his three tiers?
Tier 1, the technical level. That's Medinsky, supposedly working on just a temporary truce document, nothing major.
Tier 2.
This was the surprising bit. Figures linked to Trump. Rubio, Witkoff, Kellogg mentioned, suggesting a direct channel bypassing official U.S. diplomacy.
Interesting. And Tier 3?
That's Putin himself, the first echelon. But only maybe showing up for a photo op, possibly with Trump, maybe Zelenskyy, but only if the groundwork is laid by the other tiers.
So it's not about real talks, it's about appearances. And targeting Trump's circle specifically.
That's the read. The messaging seems clear. Float the idea of a technical truce to sound reasonable, signal a back channel to Trump, and use Putin's potential appearance as leverage, especially linked to a Trump meeting. The AI is pretty convinced it's all pre-scripted.
Feels like it. So Venediktov puts this out there. What's the effect on Europe likely to be? Does it change anything?
Probably not for the better. According to the AI, it likely just adds to the confusion, the hesitation.
Reinforces the wait-and-see approach.
Exactly. The AI sees Venediktov as an instrument here, used to pacify those Western politicians who are desperate for any sign of de-escalation, however flimsy. The goal: legitimize the whole farce, weaken resolve for tough action.
And what does the AI see as the next scenes in this play?
More contacts between Lavrov and Trump allies? Maybe. Putin perhaps signaling he'll only talk seriously with the U.S. And more chatter about a realistic truce, which probably means one favorable to Russia.
Discouraging. But then Zelenskyy himself pushed back, didn't he? Calling it theatrical in a tweet.
Yes, that was a really strong countermove. Strategic communication at its best, according to the AI.
How so?
By calling it theatrical, he directly attacks the Kremlin narrative. He makes a clear distinction. Ukraine and Turkey are serious, he implies, but the Russian delegation, that's the theater.
Trying to define reality.
Precisely. And maybe rally the allies who see it similarly, US, UK, Baltics, Nordics, around that reality. It's a masterclass in framing.
Cutting through the noise. Now, we also saw Trump's reaction to Putin not showing up. He called it fooling around.
Yeah, his response was, well, typical Trump, maybe. Dismissive, not very coherent strategically. The AI saw it as more evidence of his transactional approach.
And Europe's silence continues through all this.
Largely, yes. And that's worrying. The AI points to internal divisions, war fatigue, maybe that underlying fear about Russia collapsing.
And that silence creates a vacuum.
Exactly. A vacuum that Russia, and maybe figures like Trump, can fill with their own narratives, potentially setting terms that hurt Ukraine.
It's frustrating. Then we heard the U.S. delegation did arrive in Istanbul. But Lavrov had just said no deal would be reached there. What's going on?
It's confusing, isn't it, the U.S. presence? Maybe it's just symbolic support for Turkey? Or maybe there are back channels to Trump allies happening.
Hard to know.
But with Putin absent, the leverage for things like sanctions threats is really weakened, isn't it? There's no top Russian official there to hold accountable if things stall.
Makes sense. It's all very murky. Then over in the UK, Prime Minister Starmer calls Russia's actions intolerable. Strong words, but...
But no immediate action followed, right. That's what the AI analysis highlighted, the gap between rhetoric and concrete steps.
And Trump chimed in again, not surprised Putin was absent. Maybe things improve in 2-3 weeks?
Yeah.
Very vague.
Yeah, that vague timeline linked to his potential involvement could actually discourage tougher Western action now. It creates this wait-and-see dynamic.
And still, no big announcements from Washington. New weapons. New sanctions.
Nothing major reported in the sources you provided. It reinforces that pattern of hesitation, which leaves Ukraine quite exposed while the fighting goes on.
Lots of talk, less action. Though you did flag one potential bit of action from Europe, punitive tariffs.
Yes, that's a flicker of something potentially concrete. The idea of hitting all Russian goods with punitive tariffs seems to be gaining some ground.
Why tariffs specifically?
Well, it might be a way around Hungary's veto on things like a full energy embargo, And it echoes Senator Graham's idea in the U.S. for really high tariffs, a way to exert broad pressure after the Istanbul talks fizzled due to Putin's no-show.
And there's something about sanctions on ships.
Right. The EU ambassadors apparently agreed on the 17th package, targeting Russia's shadow fleet, those old, often uninsured tankers they're using to get around oil sanctions. So some movement there.
But the main talks are dead for now because Putin didn't come.
That seems to be the consensus. And you had statements from French and German leaders hinting at tougher sanctions if there's no proper ceasefire soon. So growing frustration, perhaps.
But will it lead to real biting action? That's the question.
That is the question.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. After digging through all these sources, what's the bottom line? The core takeaway from this whole Istanbul situation?
I think the clearest insight is that these talks, as they stand, look much more like a Russian political performance than a genuine effort for peace.
Just going through the motions.
While Ukraine is obviously there fighting for a real, just end the war, the intentions seem worlds apart.
And the big risk you mentioned earlier, it's the West just becoming passive spectators, watching the show.
Exactly. It's crucial, isn't it, for Western leaders and, frankly, for all of us, to see this for what it is, largely staged, and not get drawn into a false narrative of progress.
There's a huge imbalance here. Ukraine fighting for survival.
Russia playing strategic games, manipulating narratives, and the West still seems unsure, wavering.
So what does the West need to do then, realistically?
Well, the analysis suggests moving past just words, providing that real, sustained, concrete support for Ukraine, and crucially, defining peace clearly.
How so?
Defining it as Ukraine's victory, the full restoration of its sovereignty, not just some managed stalemate or a ceasefire that locks in Russian gains.
That's a critical distinction. Victory, not just stopping the fighting on bad terms.
Precisely.
Okay, a powerful point to end on. And here's something for you, the listener, to think about. As we watch this theater play out, knowing real lives are on the line, what's our role? What can you do to demand real action, push for genuine peace, and not just settle for the illusion?
Worth considering.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.